Now recognize Scott Pringle on the Regional Rapid Transit update.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, TBARTA Board. I hope you can hear me well. Since our last meeting, we've made quite a bit of progress. So Chris, if you want to go ahead and get started with the next slide. Thank you. So the last time we met, we had a great conversation about identifying alternatives that can be developed and advanced through the project. And with that direction from the TBARTA Board, we have been doing just that. We've been working on those concepts. We've had 2 opportunities for public involvement, major opportunities. We held several workshops earlier in the year, and we were fortunate enough to get in a couple of charrettes, 6 different charrettes, which I'm going to talk about later in the presentation, in early March, right before the stay-at-home orders were beginning to occur. So we're working on those concepts. We've been collecting public input and moving forward towards that completion of milestone 2. So this is the schedule here. You can see, as we noted, we're on track. Even with the current challenges, we are moving forward full steam ahead. We are absolutely prepared to bring forward some results of the conceptual development that we've been doing over the past several months at your next board meeting in May. The focus that is a big part of that milestone 2, are 2 elements, both defining the alignment as well as defining the station types. So what you see here is a quick reminder of those alignments that we discussed at your prior meeting. You can see, working from left to right, is alternative 2, which is the recommendation coming from the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan. Alternative 3 actually looks at dedicated transit all the way from Tampa into Pasco County, whereas alternative 4 is looking at dedicated transit lane all the way from St. Petersburg to downtown Tampa. And alternative 5 is evaluating almost nearly 100% dedicated lanes across the entire 41-mile corridor, with the exception of getting out of the interstate environment to make good connections to downtown Tampa. Next slide, please. So in developing these concepts, Brian and TBARTA staff and I have spent a significant amount of time with FDOT staff, getting to really understand all the details and aspects of the TBNX program, and making sure that we understand all aspects of how this project can fit in with TBNX, the feasibility of designing our project as part of that larger program, the safety and the design capability of our project in relationship to TBNX. I'm not sure if I can even tell you the number. We've had, well, I would say in excess of 20 meetings at this point with FDOT to make sure that coordination is occurring effectively. We've also had some really great input from our executive team, which is, of course, TBARTA staff, but also includes FDOT staff and the 3 transit agencies, Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough. Had some good conversations about, what are we looking at as far as operations, the preferences from those transit agencies, relationship to operations, safety, and access. So with that, I'm going to actually bring forward some of the concepts that we're evaluating now. Again, we'll have more information for you next month, but some of the things that we're looking at and some of the opportunities that we see is that when we start looking at in Pinellas County, we do have an opportunity for a dedicated transit lane by maximizing and expanding that outside shoulder. And you can see that typical section there in front of you on the slide. The concept is that we would need about 16 feet. 12 foot of that would be a dedicated transit lane for the BRT vehicle, and that still allows us 4 foot of shoulder for mostly for disabled vehicles, as well as major rain events where we need that drainage to be accommodated in that outside shoulder. So what we're looking at now is actually having that start right after we essentially leave the Central Avenue BRT corridor out of downtown St. Pete's and carry that all the way up into the greater Gateway area, and at which time we would hopefully make a connection to an intermodal center inside of the greater Gateway area. Now, jumping across the bay, what we're looking at here is actually doing a completely standalone transit corridor that is in the median of the interstate, using that space that's been preserved by the state for transit. You can see the representation there of how we would actually go about designing that. And the really interesting thing about this, this portion of the project is that we are actively looking at concepts that can design that corridor in such a way that it's not only effective for bus rapid transit, but it'll also be available for light rail transit at some point in the future if the need so arises. So we're designing it with both of those modes in mind, making sure that we're really paying attention to our future needs within the Tampa Bay area. Next slide, please. So now as we leave downtown Tampa and we're heading up to the university area, we actually have both options on the table right now. We're both looking at an inside shoulder or an inside running lane for the transit vehicle, as well as an outside running lane. You can see the two typical sections here. And a lot of the decision on whether we are operating outside or inside has a lot to do with the station conversation and some of the input we're getting on from the neighborhoods as to proper station design. So with that, I'll take the next slide. So when we have conversations about operating on the outside shoulder, we've got a lot of questions to make sure, from stakeholders, from the public, as to how that would actually look and operate, making sure that we're ensuring safety. The rendering that you see here, actually, Chris, if you don't mind, can we start that rendering again from the beginning? My apologies. So before you push play, Chris, you can see here on the image that there's a solid red striped line. That's conceptually indicating where the transit lane is, and that would be for transit only. However, when we get to a situation where we're at an interchange where there's an off-ramp, we are very cognizant of the fact that we have to allow automobiles to cross that transit lane to get off at the interchange. And you can see that transition zone in this visual where you see the hatched line between solid red to hashed or dashed red line. So Chris, please go ahead and play the rendering. Thank you. So as you can see, the transit vehicle moves into that transition zone, as well as automobiles who are getting off at the interchange. As the vehicle continues to move forward, those automobiles have the ability to actually exit the interstate. And then you will see the transit vehicle continues through and back into a dedicated lane, giving it the ability to bypass congestion that may exist on the interstate. So we feel very strongly, working with our executive team, that this is preferable as far as operations, and especially when we're looking at ensuring safety for all users of that corridor. Next slide, please. So the second ingredient that we've been focused on is stations, and we've had some really great what we call station charrettes, where we've gone out to the community and had facilitated events where individuals were working with a moderator and a facilitator and working through this exercise. So Chris, go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So we had almost 100 people join us at these events that were held in early March. You can see the locations where we held those charrettes here at Bears Avenue Station area, Himes, the Tampa Seminole Heights area, State Route 54, Waters, Bird, and 62nd. We had two events that had a lower attendance at those events. A lot of that is at that time, I do believe we were starting to have some questions about the pending virus threat. So as soon as we can, we'd like to go back out and hold some more outreach for those neighborhoods. But at the current time, we're actually taking this in-person charrette format and we're designing it to be virtual, and we're hoping to have that live next month. I will definitely be able to report back to the board on that live tool. And the great thing about that is everyone can be part of the charrettes and really provide us a lot of really good input. So what was important for us and is important for the project is that we didn't take a one-size-fits-all to station design, and that we wanted to make sure that we understood what the right fit is for each neighborhood. And by right fit, I mean the scale of the station, the context in which the station is fitting into, and making sure it serves those neighborhoods. So we had three key activities that the charrette members engaged in. The first is we asked them to tell us about their neighborhood. And we actually used information straight from Taryn Sabia's best practices, TOD best practices that she presented to the board several months back, in which she talked about sort of neighborhood or station typologies. So we presented that exact information from her report to each one of the charrettes, and then we asked the participants to vote on what they thought that neighborhood typology should be for each one of these station areas. The second is we actually asked them to provide some high-level information or input as to what they think an ideal station location could be. And we kind of broken up in our station area into 4 quadrants and asked them to weigh in on each one of those. But it was the third exercise that I think most really enjoyed. And based on their selection of a neighborhood typology, they were given a fictional budget. And with that fictional budget, they had essentially playing cards that represented a number of different station amenities, each with its own individual cost. And they were asked to spend down that budget to build their perfect station for that neighborhood. And I think that was a really great exercise. We got an amazing amount of input, very lively conversations. It was fun. And with that, I actually have a video that I'm gonna ask Chris to start here in a second. But it's about a 5-minute video, so it's a little bit longer, but we felt it was really important that the board had the opportunity to actually hear, not just from me, but hear directly from those participants, some of the things that were important to them. So Chris, if you could please with the video. This project, the Regional Rapid Transit Project, it's a 41-mile corridor connecting all the way from downtown St. Pete and eventually into the Wesley Chapel area. So the purpose of the project is making sure, like I mentioned before, those mobility needs. We're looking at modern mobility. We make sure it's quick, safe, reliable, frequent, and regional. Some of the other objectives that we're focused on, making sure that everything that we're doing and designing as part of the project is context sensitive to the communities it serves. And it's actually your input by joining us this afternoon in this exercise that provides me that detail to make sure that we understand what the right fit is. So now I'm actually going to ask John to come up and walk you through the next section.
So we're focusing on the station today, but the station really should reflect the neighborhood that it's in. Think about what the neighborhood is like now, and think about what the neighborhood could be like in 20 years. And that's how we're going to select the typology. The typologies that we're going to discuss really go from urban center, which is the densest, to a suburban neighborhood. And we're selecting the neighborhood typologies based on what's right for this station, what's right for this neighborhood, what's right for this community.
Literally all we're asking you to do is yell out 1 or 2 word adjectives of what you think this neighborhood should be in the future.
Multi-generational.
Multi-generational.
Healthy.
Healthy, yes.
Inclusive.
Clean and maintained.
Safe. Prosperous.
Human mobility focused.
Landscape.
Diverse.
Beautiful.
Compact.
Yeah. Reliable. Perfect. There you go. Suburban neighborhood. Urban neighborhood. Oh, urban neighborhood has it. Okay, urban neighborhood got it. Urban neighborhood has it. How about an urban neighborhood?
We really battled on this. I think the solar, what Marilyn talked about, that's something that could be negotiated. Yeah.
Of all the station locations, this one probably deserves all of those things.
I'm going to say like 50% maybe, but that have a car, but most of those cars don't run very well.
Yeah.
When Dixie's gone, and that's a free parking spot. Nobody really never goes there no more.
To that point, like I cannot emphasize enough, one of the things that was so profound to me when I found this community, I couldn't believe how beautiful it was, how well preserved. I mean, everything in my home city is gone.
I think you need this. This is nice if you want to tell people that, like somebody coming from St. Petersburg, and they get here and they go, what's around me?
I would be more in favor of it.
Yeah, I would.
First, we wanted to capitalize on all of the activities that were happening here now, but still looking into the future.
Here, where our big savings was with the parking, as we know that we can use existing parking because this ridership is primarily going to be during the day.
And we want to make this station attractive. We just don't want a flat roof over it. Florida, summers, sideways wind blowing, And if it's not looking safe and attractive, nobody's going to use it. We thought it was important to include scooter and bicycle rental facilities, and we pair that up with places for ride share.
Everybody else did choose were the higher level materials. We thought that this station could get away with more natural feel.
We upgraded on the architectural design, we upgraded on the amenities and the materials used for it. So that way we would have something that really represented Seminole Heights, how artsy it is.
Lots of amenities to encourage people to use their neighborhood as the way to get there rather than a vehicle.
We also have a parking lot, a small parking garage, but the ones that built up, because we thought maybe if Walmart or Midtown don't want to collaborate with us, we can offer them extra parking so they can also help us with some space.
Our non-negotiables, we did want to do the complete streets several blocks out because it's very important for this neighborhood.
There's such limited space. If we're creating an urban environment isn't a sea of asphalt, a sea of concrete.
For a neighborhood to have a real sense of identity, they need distinct features, and so this is how we were hoping to achieve that.
Well, that's why I kind of like this format. So what do you guys think of the format today? Was that fun? Did you guys enjoy your time?
I did. The best shred I've ever done.
Wow. I'll take that. Very good. So like I said, that was just a quick summary of the charrettes themselves. What I have on screen in front of you is actually those 6 charrettes in the neighborhood typology that each one of the charrettes had chosen. As you would imagine, pretty straightforward. You know, we're looking at something that's like similar to a suburban neighborhood at State Route 54 in Pasco, whereas in Hillsborough and Pinellas, we got a lot of input on, you know, looking for an urban neighborhood station typology, with the exception of the Himes area where the Midtown development is ongoing right now, where the participants really saw that that's an opportunity for sort of a big mixed-use business center. Next slide, please. So I did ask people for some input as to a station location. Like I mentioned before, we sort of blocked out the station area into quadrants and got some really good feedback. You know, in some cases we had, you know, benefits or pros and cons for all 4 quadrants and not necessarily complete consensus on a location. But there are examples, for example, in Pasco County at State Route 54, where we had some really great input, and it was pretty clear to everyone in the room that, you know, that area around the Orange Groves was a perfect location for a station. So great consensus there. We did take a slightly different approach for the Tampa Seminole Heights area because we know we've got some work to do in identifying, you know, what is the right station location in regards to the cross street that it connects to. So we asked folks to, you know, look at whether it was Osborne, Martin Luther King, or Lake, or Flora, Nebraska. Had some really good input on Osborne, MLK, and Lake. A lot of conversations about the affordable housing development near Robles Park. The one consensus we did get from, you know, those members that were in attendance at the charrette was that maybe Flora, Nebraska is not necessarily the best location for a station because you are so close to downtown Tampa. So great input on some station locations. Next slide, Chris. What you see here is we actually quantified all that information that we collected from those charrettes in terms of people's selections as to the different station amenities. Anywhere where you see the cells are colored in blue, we found more, those are areas where we found great consensus across all 6 charrettes, where, you know, out of the 19 tables, you know, 2/3 of those tables were, you know, in favor of things like wayfinding, seating, LCD monitors, bike racks, and real-time passenger information. A signature architectural style with premium materials and public art installations and landscaping. Technology was a no-brainer. Everyone saw the need for Wi-Fi and security, you know, potentially looking at some restrooms along the way. But some of the things where we saw, you know, some diversity across those 6 charrettes where the type of enclosures, so, you know, kind of looking at, you know, should it be a full canopy or an actual enclosure itself? Although we did get some really good consensus on solar, that was very popular. Yeah. Parking was a great aspect of the, and we spent a lot of time talking about parking because I know it's something that we've discussed here at the TBARTA board. So we got some really great input, and it did vary across the different charrettes. We gave each table the opportunity to choose as much parking or no parking as they preferred. And what we saw is that in areas like Pasco County, there was definitely an interest and an understanding that a lot of people may be driving to that particular station location, so the parking was important. Whereas in Pinellas and Hillsborough and some of those urban neighborhoods, the conversation was, if we need any parking at all, maybe it's just a few spots and it's more so for ride share, Uber, Lyft connections and taxis. So we really took that to heart when we were thinking about station design and customizing these stations to fit the neighborhood context and scale. We also had great conversations about how do you get to the station, looking at bike and pedestrian improvements, not just at the station itself, but maybe a block or several blocks out from the station, because we recognize that for someone to get and use the service, they're most likely a pedestrian, a transit user, or a bike user, so they need that type of connectivity. So with that, Chris, next slide, please. So when we saw consensus across the charrettes that we've conducted to date, specifically a 2/3 majority consensus across those 19 tables, we actually started working with TBARTA staff and sort of outlining what we think are kind of the base amenities for the project as a whole. And we've kind of settled on at this point is, looking at the requirements of such as accessibility for all, off-board fare collection, maybe an option, either a full canopy or a partial enclosure, depending upon the station location. Those solar panels, we included that. Branding, making sure that we've got a signature style that really kind of communicates to the traveling public that this is something different. This is a premium service and it's something that they're not necessarily accustomed to. We included the technology, as we discussed, the drop-off pickup areas for Uber and rideshare, those pedestrian improvements and bike racks and restrooms at key locations, either at the intermodal centers or specifically to serve drivers. Next slide, Chris. So the areas where we're going to look to customize the station design based on the feedback we're getting from the public, as you would imagine, parking. So we really want to be very cognizant of the needs that each neighborhood has, and the conversations that we've been having is that in those urban neighborhoods, the need for parking really isn't as strong as maybe in some of the suburban areas, whereas people have the opportunity to walk or bike or use local transit to make that transfer. So that will be a station by station sort of decision and exercise. Public art, had a lot of great conversation about public art. We hope that we can actually work in cooperations with the neighborhoods to have unique public art installations at each one of these stations to sort of signify the uniqueness of that neighborhood and serve the context of that neighborhood. We also had some really great conversations about complete streets, and recognized based on some of our stakeholder comments that we have a really good opportunity to work jointly with the local jurisdictions who already have complete streets programs in place and maybe leverage that so that we can really look to expand some improvements for bike and ped, not just at the station area, but several blocks out from the station area to ensure that good connectivity, and where appropriate, looking for scooter and bike share rental facilities at these individual station areas. So that's where we're at so far. Like I said, we're working on alignment. We're working on some of those station design concepts. We'll bring you back some information in May as far as those alternatives that we've been discussing and the performance and cost of those alternatives. And then we'll continue working on this station design concept even through the majority of the next several months into the summer. And like I said, we want to keep our opportunities for public engagement open. We're going to have those virtual charrettes live, hopefully very soon. We're working very hard to get that active as soon as possible. And then when we can, continue public outreach, especially in relationship to getting some good input on those station areas. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will take any questions.
Thank you, Scott. Questions for Scott?
This is Commissioner Kemp. I have a question.
Yes.
I have several, actually. So I just wanted to get an update here because it looked like you had significantly reduced the parking. What is the total number of parking spaces that you're looking at now?
I don't have an exact number for you because we're still in the process of doing that design, but it is definitely less than what we were kind of as that sort of placeholder that we had during the prior planning phase. And like you said, we've discussed this in the past, Commissioner, you know, a lot of it is coming down to making sure that we're serving the neighborhoods properly.
So you had 9,000 before. You have no idea maybe what that is going. You had 9,000 parking spaces when you first presented this, and you don't have any idea of what you might reduce it to?
It's an ongoing exercise as we work through the design concept. So
okay.
I can try to give you a sort of an order of magnitude at the May board meeting, but it's certainly coming down from the placeholder we had previously.
Because yeah, and I appreciate that. You know that I mean, it was predominantly the parking garage plan in the past, and I'd like to know how much it's moved from that. And, you know, I have very strongly felt, as you know, that we really don't need any more parking garages in Hillsborough County. So if parking garages were put in other places, the local jurisdiction there would have to match the costs for the parking garages.
We're still looking to figure out exactly how the funding for the project will be. And again, that's, you know, we still have a lot of work to do on this project over the next year. So those will be ongoing conversations.
And even with changes, I just think for the record, I need to put in there that I really think that it is, that we should never be focused on an interstate system for a transit system as a central part of a transit system. The interstate has not been the central part of any transit systems across the country through a local urban area. There's just no such example of that. And there's a real good reason for that. Across the country, people don't go to stops in other places where they've had choices about stops that are in the interstate, because when you have to walk from your neighborhood to the interstate, it's a very inhospitable bad walk, and not one that you really want to take to catch transit. And 80% of people walk to their transit. Also, when you're taking transit, if you took it on one side of the interstate, let's say going south on 275, then you'd have to walk underneath the interstate to the other side to take it north back. So it's always going to require that. And it's it in itself is I just think not a place to be putting any kind of significant in transit investment. I just don't want to see dollars that are so desperately needed for things like our operations, our buses, our electric buses, our service that is so critical to people at the local level and on our arterial streets and local streets. I would not want to see that investment not being there. And so I'm, as you know, just do not think that this is a appropriate focus for a transit system. I think we need to focus on our arterials. We need to focus on our local streets. And while this might be good for a commuter system to connect one long region to another, from downtown to downtown, Wesley Chapel to USF, and then to downtown Tampa to the airport, I don't think it's anything to make more with more stations, more stops, or to try to make a central part of our transit system.
Thank you, Pat. Other questions? Scott, I did have one myself. I commend you on putting in the the bike share and the scooter stations there at the stations. I wanted to ask too, have you proactively looked at any ongoing potential partnerships with Uber and Lyft and other rideshare companies to have encouragement of AV technology and transportation on demand services at the various stations as well?
That's an excellent point, Mr. Chairman. We haven't at this date. We're kind of working on those, conceptual design elements. So duly noted, we'll continue to investigate that.
Yeah, I think as time goes on, you'll have more and more on-demand transportation services. So I think that has to be integrated, future looking into the design of this for special Uber and Lyft drop-offs or any kind of automated vehicle drop-offs. So.
Agreed. And it's interesting, even over the past couple of months, our sort of a sense of how we develop the operating plan for this particular project is evolving as we are seeing our world evolve. We're really thinking less about this project as one route that starts in St. Pete and ends in Wesley Chapel. We're actually looking at sort of a braided route operations that could, penetrate into the neighborhoods and provide more customized, almost like a mobility on demand type of service, where we know the sort of key destinations and attractions are. And so we're trying to evolve with the times and looking at that as part of this project.
Right, and just one other further comment too, I think in following up on what Commissioner Kemp said, I think that as a policy, we need to, even if it's not required by local code, to de-emphasize the size of the parking and encourage folks to take alternate means, whether it be bike, walking, autonomous vehicle, whatever, to get to the stations as opposed to driving a car. We have to be proactive in that and not just reactive to local standards and so forth in that calculus.
Agreed. We've heard that from the board. We've heard that from the public now. And then, of course, there's the secondary benefit that our reduction in parking needs also helps with the capital costs.
Correct. Other questions for Scott?
I have a question. I don't see that. I see Catherine Starkey has her mic off or her mute, but should I ask a question?
Is Catherine, Catherine, we can't hear you. Is your mute on?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Okay, yeah, I think you were recognized
Can you
first.
hear me?
Yes, we recognize you first and then Commissioner Kemp.
And I have to leave. I have a virtual town hall in just a little bit, so I have to head to my office. But I just want to say that I am fully in support of a solution that gets us to a regional transit opportunity. We are the largest MSA in the country without a solution. And it just is frustrating to hear people trying to stop that. And so I am, whatever baby step we're going to take, we got to take it. But to continue to be the largest area in the country without a solution is not acceptable for me and a lot of my constituents. So thank you. And I have like 2 minutes and I have to go.
Thank you and concur with that. Commissioner Kemp.
Yes, I just had one more question. With regards to this study, recently I'd seen a report on coronavirus being one of the factors in it that they're looking at is the fact that it seems to be affecting people much worse in the areas with bad air pollution. The air pollution that comes primarily from cars and from highways, particulate matter and noxious gases, and that it has already, I've seen some watershed studies that have shown that it has a strong relationship to asthma, childhood asthma, cardiopulmonary disease, cancer, and maybe even dementia at this point. And they're looking very closely, and perhaps coronavirus. I've always been very cautious about attracting people into that air. And, they've talked about that perhaps even reaching out to a mile from interstates, and not so bad in arterial and other smaller places where there's not as many cars. Has that been looked at all with regards to this study?
So I can respond to that. As we move through the summer, after we get through the May board meeting and we sort of settle on some options that you want to carry forward, we're going to begin our environmental analysis throughout the summer. So I can get some more of the air quality information that you're requesting, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Scott, for that.
Commissioner Seal, I believe, is asking for attention.
Sharon?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I was curious how again, with COVID-19 and the possible effects on mass transit and buses and so on, I know that we have a separate study that'll be looking at different technologies, but it might be that, and I know that we need to marry that technology study together with this. But there may even be redesigns of buses where they could even be like little individual pod areas, or who knows what it might create. So I hope that Scott, that you're kind of looking at that at the present time, because this may change totally how we operate a bus system, or it may cause us to look at other technologies to put in this particular route. Thank you.
No, thank you, Commissioner. That's an excellent comment. After the May board meeting, one of the next items we're going to be starting to tackle and bring to the board is a conversation about the vehicle, which fits in very well with your comment.
Thank you, Scott. Any other questions? Okay, none being heard, we'll turn finally to old and new business.